My name is Anne-Marie Batson. Welcome to a very special British rowing interview for Black History Month 2020. Did you know, according to the latest British Rowing Diversity Report that was published back in 2017, less than 5% of members of the BAME community are members compared to 14% of the population of England and Wales. We're going to talk about the actions that need to be taken, or at least to taken to the next level, to make the sport even more accessible than what it is for the country and probably the rest of the world as well. We're going to talk about what actions we're going to need to take, what the experiences have been, and what lessons we've learned as well. And while this is very much an informal conversation about people of colour, this is a discussion for everybody. So we hope you enjoy it. And I say we a lot in my introduction because I'm not alone for this important conversation. I've been joined by 4 wonderful people who've very graciously given up their time to have a chat with me today about diversity in British rowing. So I'd like to say my first hello to Tinashe, who is the community rowing coach at London Youth Rowing and Thames Tradesmen Rowing Club. How are you doing, Tinashe?
Not bad, thank you, Anne-Marie.
Good to see you. Next up, 22-year-old Maia Ford, who is a postgraduate student at Nottingham University and also a rower with Thames Rowing Club. How are you doing, Maia?
Good, thank you, Anne-Marie.
Good to see you, good to see you. All the way in Nigeria, please welcome Donna Itebet, who is a former GB rower, now head of corporate finance at Babangona in Nigeria.
Hi, thanks, Anne-Marie.
Good to see you, Donna. And last but certainly not least, Mr. Christian Chimpong, who is a young rower who learned to row at the London Youth Programme. How are you doing, Christian?
I'm right, thank you.
Good. Lovely to see you all today. Thanks for joining me today as well. So let's get going with our conversation. Let's start with you, Tinashe. How did you get to where you're going today and what made you become a rower?
So I picked up rowing in my second year of university, looking for like extracurricular activities to do. And yeah, I kind of picked it up as a hobby just to spend a bit more time outside, and I got to know the communities a bit more and found that yeah, it's something I wanted to like be a part of, and also just aid a bit of personal development.
And Maia, how did your journey begin in rowing?
I also learned through London Youth Rowing. So after the 2012 Olympics, I was really inspired. I saw quite a lot of rowing on TV, thought that I'd give it a go. And then, yeah, I did learn to row course at Thames Rowing Club.
I must admit, I loved watching the rowing at London 2012 because it was at Eton Dorney. It was lovely, glorious, sunny weather, wasn't it? And it just, yeah, it was absolutely amazing, absolutely amazing. Donna, how did your journey start into rowing?
First started when I moved from Canada to the UK. So a lot of sports I'd picked up and I was playing in Canada weren't available here in the UK. So I sort of just got channeled into rowing. Absolutely loved it. And then also, like, my sister at the time she actually represented GB during the Beijing Olympic cycle. So I think she also was sort of an inspiration to stay in the sport.
And what made you fall in love with the sport, Donna?
For me, I think it was mostly the camaraderie, so your teammates. I was a big fan of the team sports, and sort of like when you're all in the same boat, no pun intended, it's just like it sort of creates a lot of bonds. I like started back from my rowing days during A levels, for sure.
Christian, why did you choose rowing as a sport?
So when I was in year 11, Fulham Reach Boat Club actually done some outreach to the schools in the area. So they brought us in for PE lessons for a couple of terms. So like each year group had like a term of rowing basically. And I really liked it, and they ended up taking part in like the Thames 100 program that they put on, which was like a nice charity event, and it was really fun. And I continued on, and I ended up like joining the club later on as well.
When you first got into the boat, Christian, can you remember what that was like, what you were thinking?
It was very scary. I didn't know what to expect, and I I didn't think a sport like that was a thing actually. So because when they first said we were going to do rowing, I was like very confused, and when I saw what was going on, I was very scared at first. It was a new experience.
Why were you quite scared about it?
Because first of all, it was unheard of, and well, for me it was unheard of. I didn't know that we could actually, like, rowing on the Thames was a thing. And then second of all, it was a thing where I guess we were just getting straight into it, so it was just kind of a thing where we were just kind of thrown into the deep end, and they just said, all right, get in the boat, and like we were in like an 8, we were in an octo, and it was just it was just like we were all just thrown into it, and it was an interesting first lesson, but it was fun.
I can imagine it was an interesting first lesson for sure. Maia, let me come to you. I want to talk to you about your experience as a rower. You're a Black person, you're female as well. What has been your experience of being a rower?
My experience, I've had a wonderful time rowing, I must say. I've been doing it for about 6 years. But I do have to say it can be quite intimidating. It's an intimidating experience, I have to say, like moving from club to club, and always being the only person of colour, or at least the only Black person. It's quite daunting, quite intimidating. I just think sometimes it makes you question whether you should be there. So as much as you are having a lot of fun, striving to improve, and you love your teammates and you're all kind of working together, sometimes it does feel like you're a bit of like an odd one out, per se.
How did you deal with that? What was your mindset in terms of that feeling intimidated?
It's always inspired me to just work even harder, but also to talk to the people around me about the way that I feel. I've never been ashamed or afraid to say I'm a minority and I feel this way, especially to the people I'm close with and the people in my boat and in my local like rowing community, and that definitely helps, because then people know, oh gosh, like she realizes this is a problem, she's okay talking about it, and it just starting the conversations, I think, is the most important thing for me.
Tinashe, do you see yourself as a rower, or do you see yourself as a Black man who rows?
I think I see myself more as a rower, because adding on to what Maia has said, I think from my experience, I've learned to having to push past the Black man who rows sort of thing, because I would have gone through exactly the same sort of process of being super conscious of like my ethnicity within the sport, and having to work around that in terms of like building trust with people, and sort of like having to sort of validate yourself within sort of like whether it's within the sport or approaching coaching opportunities. I think I've had to push past that and really use the sport as a form of my expression of myself, to say, this is I'm a rower, sort of thing. Yeah.
Why were you determined to push past that, to be seen as somebody who could row a boat?
Because it's a really like interesting sort of like form of expression, rowing. It's such a technical sport. It requires a lot of dedication and discipline, and for some reason I was just really driven to like become like quite good at it and understand it in a way.
Donna, was your experience as a rower similar to Maia, that you wanted to be seen just as a rower, that you're just not a Black woman who happens to row a boat?
So it's interesting. So I'm actually a Thames Rowing Club alumni as well. And at the time when I started club rowing as a track to go into GB, so I was one of 2, I think, Black and or ethnic people within Thames Rowing Club. And me and the other girl were constantly confused. We'd be in the same boat, but we'd be constantly called each other's names, and we didn't look anything alike. So even if you yourself wanted to be like, I'm no different from, the other rowers, instances like that, always seem to highlight that, yes, I am different, I am set apart. So there was no sort of running away from the fact. So in a way, I actually tried to own the fact that, yes, I was a Black rower. when I was younger, I wasn't sort of as vocal as I am now. And I think sort of the conversations we're having now around Black Lives Matter and sort of like really pushing the conversation is just, and not being not racist, but actually being anti-racist, because not being proactive about these issues has shown to not be sufficient in the past. I think it's very important for people to have these conversations and just not be uncomfortable about it. Black people to sort of not sort of rock the boat. They've sort of not tried to assert their individuality. They've always tried to like fit in and sort of, melt into the people surrounding them. But I don't think that actually benefits anyone in the end. And actually it's our responsibility and everybody else's responsibility to be our true selves and sort of make people accept that. And if they're not familiar with it, take that task to sort of educate them.
Christian, how conscious were you as a young Black man about to go into a sport that over time has been seen as very elitist and very white?
So at first it wasn't very apparent to me. So mainly the first, like my first experiences with the rowing were with my school and were with like other people in the council. And then as time went on, it became more apparent to me that it was an elitist sport and that it was a sport that not, I guess, many people of my background would engage with. I guess like one of the bigger experiences I had was when I went to Henley Regatta as well. And it was still a great day. I just it kind of dawned on me at that moment as well. Even at my boat club, I think I was like one of few people of color as well, and just people of my background. Then as time went on, I began to think about it more, but I realized like it shouldn't really be a problem, because at the end of the day, we're still going to be the same people in the same boat together, and we're going to be working together in a team sport.
That's a great point. And you've also been part of the Love Rowing, which is the charitable arm. You're in a video, aren't you? Talking your how did you get involved in that?
So it actually, through my boat club, I ended up working with British Rowing for an internship in I think their comms and marketing team. And because of that, afterwards as well, they ended up reaching out to me to ask to take part in that as well. So I've taken part in a few promotional materials in order to it kind of helps promote the idea that like rowing is a sport that can be for anybody and everybody. So by taking part in those things, I guess it's kind of a way of me saying this can be a sport that everyone can enjoy together, which I feel like is an important message to promote. Yeah,
absolutely. It is very much very. Donna, I want to come back to you, because as somebody who now works in finance, is that right?
Yep.
One of the barriers to this particular sport is about finances, as well as potentially somebody's colour as well. Why do you believe there are barriers to this particular sport?
I mean, it is an expensive sport in terms of, if you want to buy a single, you're looking at anything from £6,000 to £10,000. And then sort of, if you want to go to clubs and you want like good boats, an 8, I think is anything upwards of 20,000. And so unless you sort of have access to those kind of funds, it is sort of difficult maybe to get yourself the on-water experience that could potentially propel you to say like international level. So that was definitely an area that I was weak in, sort of pitting me against other people who had 10 years of experience growing up in Henley, being on the river every weekend and they're single, sort of not having that. But sort of what did get me sort of in that arena was sort of access to a rowing machine. And I think now that with the rise of CrossFit and sort of gyms sort of adopting more rowing machines, I do think sort of access to that part has improved somewhat. And so you can use that, and you can go onto the concept website, you can pit yourself against the records online, so you can sort of build yourself and sort of see where you are in terms of the landscape, and sort of use that to put yourself on the map, and also using it sort of for people to identify talent, and then sort of the on-water experience and all the other like additional expenses that come with that can come later, but at least you've already sort of proven your physiological ability to exceed at the sport.
Donna makes a great point about physiology, Maia, which is what I want to talk to you about, because there is these, and I'll temper my language here, silly misconceptions about Black people that we can't swim, women hate getting their hair wet, our bodies aren't built for the water, all those kinds of things. How frustrating is it to hear that these misconceptions, these stereotypes could affect somebody of color, a Black person, or a mixed race person wanting to get involved in the sport?
It's incredibly frustrating, and especially considering that so many of these ideas are so old and they still exist today. It's just crazy to me. And, you know, doing a psychology course, I'm learning at the moment about all of this scientific racism that's just existed for decades. It's still around and it is internalized. And I remember when I first started, I'd always done sports where I'd be doing kind of intervals. I'd always done rowing and sorry, not rowing, obviously. I'd always done netball and tennis and things where I'd kind of be moving really quickly. And then suddenly I was doing endurance. And I remember one of the first things I thought when I sat on a rowing machine was, oh my gosh, I'm not built for this. And then now I think how crazy for me to think that I wasn't like physiologically made for this sport just because of all of these ridiculous lies. It's incredibly frustrating, and I wish there was more out there to kind of debunk these myths, that people were more aware that they are not true.
Absolutely. And Tinashe, let's talk about the intimidation side of things. That's something that you've been conscious of. How much is that a barrier for somebody of color, whether a Black person or a mixed race person or another ethnicity wants to get involved in the sport?
I think from my experience and having worked with different communities and trying to get other communities involved in the sport, a lot of it stems from the sort of lack of support within our sort of social sort of demographic backgrounds. So I've worked with a lot of communities within perhaps the Hounslow, Ealing area, trying to pull sometimes girls from a Muslim background into the sport. And a lot of the intimidation or the lack of sort of awareness into the sport is not enough support from other people to be like, it's a good sport to try out, or will help you or aid you in trying out the sport. So a lot of the times, I think perhaps when an ethnic person is trying to break into the sport, they might not have enough support that it's a good thing to try out. And I think that's where a big part of the intimidation can come from.
And Christian, for you, I guess when you started learning about rowing, there's also the other side of it, which is about, is this fun to do? Is this, do I really want to get in a boat and row it when I could be out with my mates, doing stuff on social media and that kind of thing? Is that also a barrier as well? Like, I don't want to call it outside influences, but stuff outside of sport, life outside of sport, could that be a barrier as well?
I mean, yeah, it potentially could be. It depends on what your motivations are with rowing, and what your goals are in general. For me, it was a thing where as I transitioned from year 11 to sixth form, I became more focused on just my education and what I needed to do. And I guess rowing helped that as well. And even talking to other people who rowed as well, they said it helps structure your day. And I've noticed that. So I would be able to have like a firm timetable I can stick to, and it's kind of reliable because I know, okay, I'm going to be at school for this long, and I'm going to head to the boat club and do about 2 to 3 hours of training, and then I'll head home, do what I need to do, then like repeat basically. And having that schedule kind of keeps you focused, and it helps bring structure to your life. Although it did mean I had a very busy schedule, and it meant I couldn't really have much of a social life. It helped my goals at the time because I was very focused on just doing the best I could at school. So just having rowing is something that I can do to improve myself, and also just do it kind of like a stress relief as well. I felt it was kind of therapeutic and helpful instead.